It was supposed to be a sanctuary, a refuge where one of America's greatest architects could find peace. But on one sweltering August afternoon in 1914, everything changed. Taliesin became a slaughterhouse. 7 lives were taken in a brutal axe murder and fire, and the horror still echoes in the charred remains of Frank Lloyd Wright's broken dream. This is the terrifying true story of the Taliesin Massacre. Welcome back, everybody. For today's video, we're exploring the haunting history of Taliesin, Frank Lloyd Wright's home. August in Spring Green, Wisconsin can get pretty hot. That's why, when Mama Borthwick Cheney, her 2 children and 3 of their friends decided to eat lunch outside on the expansive porch of Taliesin, Wright's country estate, nobody thought twice about it. However, those same stifling temperatures may have contributed to the unrest brewing inside of their employee, Julian Carlton. Hired by Mama just months before, Carlton was already becoming a problem. A black Bahamian man who'd only been to the rural Midwest out of obligation and loathing for his employer, he was a stranger in a strange land. It was said he'd even had trouble finding the house, getting lost in the woods surrounding it. Like the oppressive heat, it was thick, heavy, hard to breathe. And somehow, everyone seemed to sense it too. He'd only made it after being directed by a local resident who happened upon his search and took pity on him. Now, as he waited on his mistress and her guests to serve their lunch, that same tension hung over him like a shroud. As the group ate and drank, joking and laughing, Carlton quietly poured them soup. Then once he'd retired to the kitchen, the truth of what was about to happen slowly began to dawn on them. What had started as a low hum in the distance grew into a roar, crashing down on Taliesin and its inhabitants like a tidal wave. As he brought it down, burying its head deep into the flesh of Mama Borthwick Cheney, her shocked gasp echoing through the warm air like a death rattle. Back in the kitchen, Carlton took something out of his pocket, revealing a glint in the sun. It was an axe. She collapsed onto the porch behind her, falling next to her sleeping child, both of them forever going to sleep. When Edwin Cheney awoke, he knew only one thing. He had to run. Turning and twisting, desperately hoping for a way out, he spied his father's study and dove inside. Just as he reached the door, a voice cut through the hazy fear gripping him, asking if he was all right. Scrambling to help him up, Carlton struck again, this time aiming for his heart. Shaking his head as he ran, he heard the sound of heavy footsteps chasing after him. Smashing through the glass doors, he stumbled out onto the lawn just as Carlton swung his axe, missing him by mere inches. Barely daring to look back, he raced across the fields, Carlton close behind. Behind him, the smell of gasoline mixed with the coppery tang of blood as he locked the front door and threw his axe to the side. But just as he thought he might catch his young prey, Edwin slipped and fell. The boy screamed, the sound carrying over the rolling hills as life ebbed away from him. Carlton watched impassively as he succumbed to his wounds, then dragged his lifeless body back towards the house. Next, he went for the second girl, and then the third, each blow ringing out like the toll of a funeral bell. Now, if you're watching this video, you probably know where this is going. Carlton cut him down, then collected his weapons, bringing them back to the house one last time. But for those few unaware of the horrific climax of this crime, let me spell it out for you. Now came the fun part. One by one, he crept back inside, hunting down his remaining victims. He screamed as his brother fell. Turning back, Carlton simply stared at him, letting his silence hang between them like a noose. Inside the dining room, 4 people were trying to escape through the hallway, their footsteps pounding against the floorboards like frantic drumbeats of impending doom. Though the home looked normal from the outside, like any beautiful prairie-style, Frank Lloyd Wright design, within its walls, it was a tomb. When they finally emerged, blinking against the harsh light of day, Carlton was waiting for them. Some of them kneeling like they were praying, others frozen in mid-scream. First, he struck the leader of the pack, knocking her off balance and sending her sprawling onto the ground. For some, death came quickly, but for others, it was a long and agonizing wait. All the doors were locked and sealed tight. The last boy didn't have time to react. But even he bore the scars of that day, both physical and psychological. He could run, he could hide, but the truth was, there was nowhere to go. There, he doused part of the building with gasoline and locked the doors. As the hours passed and the fire raged, neighbors started heading toward Taliesin. His final victim was trapped inside, desperately trying to find another way out. But the only thing she found was her own demise. As the sun beat down on Taliesin, those gathered around knew something terrible had happened. But even they couldn't have imagined the hellish scene that awaited them inside. Those who managed to brave the stench of death found their bodies riddled with axe wounds, piled up in hallways. It was a macabre sculpture garden of violence and pain. But it got worse. There was no way out. Trapped inside with their injuries and the growing heat of the afternoon, they burned to death. Only one person survived the blaze, leaping through a window to escape the flames. And though the events that transpired that day would earn Carlton infamy, the truth was, he'd long been dismissed from service and was due to leave Taliesin soon. But that didn't stop him from taking as much time as he needed to plot his revenge. And he used his knowledge of the house, knowing exactly which rooms to lock and seal, how to trap his victims, and which areas to saturate with gasoline. Unfortunately, no one knows. Interviews with witnesses and surviving family members painted a picture of a troubled man who was constantly agitated, but nothing concrete. After all, he'd been here almost a year. He had time to plan. In fact, reports from the time said he was often happy and joked around with the others. The question is, why? Sadly, that answer has been lost to time. Some believe he snapped completely, descending into madness and targeting the people who were closest to him. Smoke rose high into the sky, painting dark clouds over the normally peaceful landscape. By the time they arrived, however, the damage was done. All 7 people had perished, 4 of them from the fire, the other 3 from blunt force trauma, likely from the axe. With the authorities notified and a crowd of onlookers gathering, many of the neighbors pitched in to help put out the blaze. It was a valiant effort, but by the time they had it under control, most of Taliesin was lost. For someone looking to start a fire, Carlton certainly did a thorough job. By the time police arrived, he was gone. But they did find something in the basement furnace that made their blood run cold. Carlton had taken his own life, swallowing acid in an attempt to destroy evidence and hide his identity. By the time they found him, he was dead. And while they arrested him posthumously, he never stood trial for his crimes. Instead, he became known as the Taliesin Axeman, a phantom killer who'd vanished into thin air. So what exactly drove him to do such a thing? He'd had arguments with nearly all the workers on site, but none of them were particularly vicious. He also confided in one worker, telling him he planned to leave Taliesin and start his own business in Chicago. So why did he turn on his employers, killing them in such a violent, gruesome way? Others think he was influenced by outside factors, like the prejudice he faced moving through Wisconsin or rumors that he'd stolen money from the house, but all of them are just guesses. We'll never know what drove him to commit such a heinous crime. He gave no confession and took no time to explain himself, not even when he stood trial for his crimes, which he never did. To this day, people visit Taliesin to experience the beauty of Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture and the rolling